Hello! It's Great Canadian Bagel here. I have another Canadian federal election forecast for you today. Before I begin, I would like to once again shout out all my channel members. I really appreciate the support you guys give the channel. And if you guys want to support the work I do here and make everything I do more accessible, more possible, by all means go on the link in the description below and press that join button. Otherwise, just do your regular YouTube things like share, subscribe, and comment below. With no further ado, let us begin. Now, before I go anywhere, I like to just announce, or let everyone know, that I have tweaked the cutout sizes here for my model, particularly these cutouts here. I made some of them bigger, particularly the GTA, Golden Horseshoe, and Greater Montreal cutouts, and I reordered them a little bit to try to make them as coherent as possible. Let me know if there's any issues. I changed the sizes because people were commenting that it was hard to see some of the Toronto writings. So let me know if it's still an issue seeing them, or if I should make them bigger or whatever, because I can always keep resizing things. I have plenty of room on the extremes here, like here and here. I can make it wider if necessary. So just let me know in the comments below if you want it resized again. Let us get on to the video. So, since the last video, that was just after the US election, we've had enough time for things to really percolate through here. And some big announcements have come from the US vis-a-vis Canada. Namely, Trump is threatening Canada if we don't get our immigration and drug policies under control. He's going to put a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods. Now, when he says under control, he really means crossings into the US. Now, I'm not here to tell you, because I've not looked into it and I don't really care enough to look into it, the actual scale of the problem with Canadian to the US legal border entry, be it drug smuggling or immigration. That's not particularly important to anything I do here. So if you want to look that up yourself, feel free, but that is the thing that Trump is talking about. And importantly, as far as Trump is concerned, it is a real concern. And that's really all that matters in regards to politics. When you talk about international politics, if the foreign government thinks something is real and they're going to threaten you over it, then that thing essentially is real. And this, combined with recent policy changes, Trudeau has announced, with the support of Jagmeet Singh, a temporary freeze on HST the GST. Well, it's going to be, the HST, but some provinces don't have HST, so it's not their provincial sales tax, on various products, such as alcohol below 7%, candy, prepared food, certain toys, not all toys, certain toys, certain clothing items, some baby things, an eclectic bag of things. And they've also announced that they're going to put out a $250 check around early April-ish, give or take. So basically, with the tax year ending, with the new budget, if you want to call it. Now, that actually leads to the conclusion that I actually think the next budget's going to pass. So I think we're going to see this election going into October next year. I think we're going to have another at least 7 months of Trudeau. There is really 0% chance that he could possibly come back at this point, unless Poilievre intentionally screws up. I don't really see how Trudeau can come back. Now, the big impact of this news from Trump, the threats from Trump, and Trudeau's HST freeze has been completely negative. It has only hurt Trudeau. A lot of Canadians think Trudeau is too weak on Trump. He's not the right guy to handle him. Now, some polling, such as Abacus, does say the opposite. But at the same token, well, the polling from Abacus, I'll just show you here. This Abacus poll does show that the Trudeau is slightly favored on dealing with Donald Trump. In that same Abacus poll, the Liberals lose and the Conservatives gain a whole net percentage point. And if you look at the last set of polls from Leger, Angus Reid, and Abacus Data, all of them report a net swing to the Conservatives. Leger has the Conservatives up a whole point and the Liberals down 5. And Angus Reid has the Conservatives flat, but the Liberals down a point. So it's still technically a swing towards the Conservatives. And then the last Main Street poll that came out earlier in November, but after my last video, that had a 30-point lead for the Conservatives, 47-17. And notably, for Main Street, that was the Liberals losing 2 points and the Conservatives gaining 3 points. So the polls haven't been very good in November and early December for the Trudeau. And it's really looking pretty hard. The polling data for the HST freeze, such as from Leger, did not look good. It really was not satisfying, or people were not happy with the change. They were not enthused about it. I'm going to just bring up the... Here we go. This is from Leger. So, on the GST/HST freeze, only 50% of Liberal voters, not 2021 Liberal voters, present day Liberal voters, thought it was a good idea. Or that it helped. 65% of Canadians thought it did not help, including the majority of the Conservatives, the Bloc, the Greens, the PPC, the NDP. Everyone thought this was bad policy. And then if you go to the $250 checks, that's even worse. No, the majority of the Liberals think that is bad policy. Literally, every party, the majority of every single party's voters thinks that $250 checks is bad policy. No one likes it. Now, if you're a longtime viewer of my channel, you would know that I don't particularly like issue polls because issue polls can be often quite misleading depending on how the phrasing is asked, the questions asked. So, you should take this with some salt. Don't overtly accept just the issue polling on its face. But it's not just the issue polling. The actual polls also swing bad for the Liberals. And that's bad for them. There is really no redeeming point here. And if you look at just the regionals across the country, the Liberals have barely holding on to one seat in BC, which is Surrey Newton. They have their seat, Surrey or Winnipeg North, holding on. Otherwise, they have nothing west of the GTA. This one seat in Brampton, I think, is the most western seat the Liberals have in the entire country, other than the Winnipeg and Vancouver seat. But that's not all. Inside the GTA, especially if we zoom in here. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. You can also see, quite clearly, the Conservatives are winning most of Brampton, almost all of Mississauga. They're breaking into Etobicoke. They're taking in central Toronto. They've won most of the outskirts. In the Golden Horseshoe, they've won every riding except Hamilton Centre. Otherwise, in Southern Ontario, they won every riding except Windsor West. These aren't good numbers for the Liberals. And in Atlantic Canada, things aren't any better. Halifax is set to flip NDP ever so slightly. Halifax West is on the cusp of flipping, as is Beaujeu and Moncton and Cape Spear. It's really just Bathurst, St. John East, and Dartmouth Cole Harbour that are the remaining solid bastions for the Liberals in Atlantic Canada. And even then, I strongly suspect ridings like Bathurst or Dartmouth Cole Harbour might change more than the model forecasts, especially Dartmouth Cole Harbour, because there wasn't a Conservative candidate last time, so the model is more dubious because of that. I'm assuming some things, so it's not just assuming that the Conservatives got 0 votes in that riding last election, but it's still, there's more margin of error there. Inside Quebec, you have the same issue. The Liberals have been wiped out of almost everywhere except Gatineau and Montreal proper. The Montreal-Laval area, I guess is a better way to say it. That Pontiac is mostly an urban seat. It looks really big on a map, but a huge percentage of it is part of Gatineau. But that said, Pontiac itself, Gatineau itself, and I can't think, Hull-Almer are all getting closer. Hull-Almer is probably going to be held by the Liberals no matter what happens unless they go to 0 seats. But still, it's not a good showing. We zoom back over here for Montreal to get a better view of it. And you can see a lot of ridings in Montreal are softening throughout the center here. The more Anglophone area, if you want to call it, it's softening a lot. And the downtown core, it's softening too. Laval's also softening. And most of these gains are going to the Bloc, though some are Conservative pickups in the Anglophone areas. Essentially, across the board, in recent polling, the Liberals are being routed. The 2 big events in November, the tariff threats and these HST promises, have proven to be disastrous. Possibly the election of Trump itself was bad for the Liberals. There was a lot of discussion prior to the election on whether Trump would be good or bad. Would Trudeau sticking up to Trump make him look good? But that doesn't appear to be happening. In fact, I'll bring this up right here. It very much looks like the case that this is actually just making Trump more popular in Canada. Again, this is from Abacus. You can see here, November 20 to 24th was before the tariff threats. This is afterwards. Trump apparently got more popular after the tariff threats than he was before in Canada, which is deeply amusing. Poilievre also got more popular in that time period, and notably, technically, Trudeau is flat. So maybe that's just an anomaly. Maybe it's just, oh, Trump's the president, people are liking him more now. I don't know. But it is quite an interesting little trend that has occurred. Now, my longtime audience will know I have always been extremely, deeply skeptical of the Liberals replacing Trudeau. I'm usually not a fan of parties switching out their leaders midway through a term, especially near the end of a term like this, because I don't think that usually does any better. However, I'm actually coming around to the position I think the Liberals will do better without Trudeau now. Even a puppet, placeholder, temporary PM. Essentially, the interim leader PM might genuinely be doing better than Trudeau right now. Trudeau, for various reasons, has acquired quite a deep antipathy among a lot of Canadians. And it seems to be the case now that no matter what happens, he's less liked for it. That there is no winning for Trudeau. And I don't really see at this stage how to do any better as Trudeau. Again, I've said before, I think if the Liberals took a lot of drastic actions in 2022 and 2023, especially a lot of their immigration changes they proposed that I talked about last video, if they did that in 2023, we might be seeing different numbers right now. But they didn't. They didn't do that. So now, it really seems to be more the case that there isn't really anything they can do. It's really just saving the kitchen sink at this point. And in that regard, a Hail Mary leader might be better than continuing with the same captain at this stage. Though there is truly no guarantee of this. It's very possible the Hail Mary will do worse, as I've said many times in the past. But I don't see any other plays left for the Liberals. This recent polling collapse in just the last month is dramatic. We look here, throughout the entirety of the fall, the Liberals started at 27.25, and mid-November they were holding 26.5. They only lost 3/4 of a point in that time period. And the Tories hadn't really gained any ground. A lot of that Liberal support loss was to the Bloc and to the NDP. But then in the last month, they've lost 1.5 points. And this isn't one poll. There's 4 high-quality pollsters that show such a big swing. But even some of the more lower-quality pollsters that I personally don't like, such as Ecos, are also showing the same thing. Ecos' early November poll had the Conservatives at 38.6, the Liberals at 28.1. Their late November poll had the Conservatives at 39.7, and the Liberals at 25.5. That is a 4-point net swing to the Conservatives. Nanos, which I don't have a problem with Nanos per se, I just don't want to pay for their service anymore because I think it's too unreliable for the cost. Their late November poll, or I'll do early November versus late November again. Their November 8th poll had the Conservatives at 41, Liberals at 25. Their end of November poll had the Conservatives at 42 and the Liberals at 23. That is also, unsurprisingly, about a 2.5-point swing. So we have 6 pollsters in field from early November / late October to roughly late November, early December, and every single pollster has shown the Liberals lose support and the Conservatives gain support. Now, the NDP numbers are a lot more chaotic, and I wouldn't be confident to say that the NDP actually did gain ground here. The NDP usually does better in online polls, and the last 3 polls entered were online. Now, that could be the case that they are gaining ground. Perhaps Liberals are jumping ship now. That could be happening. But I wouldn't be necessarily trusting that just yet. We will have to see where it goes. And across the country, the Conservatives are gaining ground. They gained a point in the last month. And it's not, again, a point in any one particular region. They're up 1.5 in the Atlantic, 0.5 in BC, 1 point in Alberta, 0.7 in Saskatchewan, 1.1 in Manitoba, 1.4 in Ontario, 0.3 in Quebec, that's the smallest one. When you break down Atlantic, it's 0.9 in New Brunswick, 2.2 in Nova Scotia, 1.3 in PEI, 1.5 in Newfoundland. We're seeing huge swings. And we're at an interesting point here. We are, at this stage, I'm willing to say, probably 10 months from an election. There's probably just enough time for the Liberals to replace Trudeau. Not enough time for that leader to really do anything of value, but just enough time to replace him. And I don't really can see... I can't see any of these major issues changing. The economy's not good. In fact, we might be entering a recession. I've seen some people even argue we're in a recession. No, that's been the case for 4 years now, so take some salt with that. But that is something people are arguing still. But most certainly, the economy's not good. Almost all job creation is federal government jobs or provincial government jobs. Inflation is barely under control. It's still hovering around 2 with quite high interest rates, 3%. Now, 3% is lower than the long-term average, but it's a lot higher than it's been in the last 20 years. And if the economy is quite weak, that's not a great sign. Housing is a little better, especially for renters, but the overall market's still really just broken. Again, like, all these things are not doing good. It's really difficult to see where things change from here. I might even be so bold as to say, I don't think the left has anything in them at this stage with this government. Personally, if you're looking at this from a long-term political strategy standpoint, where your goal as the party is to have the most time in government, not the time right now, but the most time throughout all of the arc of history, or at least your lifetime, I think it is an absolute political malfeasance that Singh is still backing Trudeau. That Singh isn't pulling the plug and calling the election right now. There is nothing for him to gain. He's down at 14 seats after flipping 2 Liberal seats. One in Toronto, this guy here, and Halifax. And flipping Nunavut. I guess they're currently holding Nunavut. Anyways, they flipped 2 Liberal seats and are still at 14. They've still lost net 11. 13 of their current seats are going Conservative. And they're gaining 2 Liberal seats in return. Or, sorry, 3. They're getting one in... No, just 2, sorry. I'm confusing myself. Is that worth it? They're losing net vote share from 2021? And all of this so they can get a few more months of limp-wristed Trudeau government that doesn't really do anything that anyone wants? It just doesn't make any sense to me. The calculus isn't there. The NDP's purpose is not to give Liberal time in government. They're not in a position to stop Poilievre. They're just pushing off Poilievre's 4-year term by 8 months. That meaningfully doesn't do anything. And it damages both the Liberals and the NDP to do so. But as much as I like to attack Singh's leadership, which is terrible, his political instincts are awful, it was, according to him, his idea for the GST freeze. which no one likes, as we've seen in the polls, and both opinion and vote intention. But even with all that, the NDP still stand a good chance of somehow failing their way into success, just because we're at a stage where it seems that Trudeau literally cannot do anything that people like. Now, is it that Trudeau himself can't do anything people like, or just that people don't like Trudeau, so anything Trudeau does, no one likes? That's an interesting question. Now, I will caution that interpretation, though, because most economists don't like the tax freeze for HST. They'll basically are saying that this is like the worst possible way to give people a tax break. Literally anything else would be better, such as, say, suspending the gas tax for a bit, or suspending the carbon tax for a bit, or literally just YOLOing a check makes more sense, though it's still a terrible idea. Economists don't like that either. And it's truly remarkable. And you might think to yourselves, like, how are the Liberals doing this? How are they doing this poorly? How are they so floundering? And with that, I will say there's an important part of a political party. And you could say extrapolate this to any organization that does anything, is there's three key people any organization that deals with other people needs. You need the leader, the money guy, and the strategist. Now, these three cannot be the same person because they need qualitatively different skill sets. They're not interchangeable. For example, the money guy has to be good at money. He has to be fiscally responsible, intelligent. He has to, in the case of, say, government, he has to know how to balance the fiscal issues of a government so they can do the policies they want without hurting the economy or minimizing damages to the economy. That is a non-trivial job. And usually that's filled by the finance minister. That's why the finance ministry exists. The other person, the main guy, the leader, that would be Justin Trudeau. The Liberals still have a leader. They don't have a money guy. Chrystia Freeland technically is sitting there, but Chrystia Freeland has no background or skill set in that field. And I don't just mean the credentialist sense of she doesn't have a finance degree or she doesn't have an economics degree. She was a journalist. Journalism and country-level economic finance are not interchangeable skills. They're different skills. Freeland might very well be a competent and fine diplomat, or a fine deputy prime minister, or whatever you want to call her. But she does not have the skills to be the money guy. Now, the Liberals had Bill Morneau, who has a background in this stuff. Now, is he or was he the best at it? I'm not sure, but I think it's safe to say he was better because the Liberals have only done worse on economic issues since he left. So I think it's safe to say he was a better money guy. Now, for the leader's job is to be the face. He has to be personable. He has to be charismatic. He has to be friendly. He has to be interesting. Because if you're just personable, friendly, charismatic, you're kind of forgettable. You have to be interesting. And Trudeau is all those things. Trudeau does the job of being the leader really well. Now, the leader also needs to have some ideas and things they care about, but that's less important, per se. Because they also have the money guy and the strategist to help them with this stuff because it's a trifecta. No one dominates the other ones. Now, the leader obviously has more responsibility. They have more power. They have more duties because they're the leader. But that is not to say the money guy or the strategist are less important. And now the final of this trifecta is the strategist. And this is where the Liberals are sorely lacking. They had Jerry Butts as it, and Jerry Butts is a kind of like the strategist equivalent of we're going to burn the forest to plant some crops. Like, yeah, it will fertilize the soil when you burn the forest down, but it's a very short-term solution. It can work, but it's not a long-term plan. And that's kind of what his leadership has been, Jerry Butts has. His strategies has been both Ontario provincially and the Liberals federally, we can see in their collapse right now. But the strategist's job is to look at politics in a very dispassionate, very cold-hearted, in a sense, almost amoral view. Their job isn't to deliver ideology. Their job isn't to deliver policy results. Their job isn't to deliver economic results. Their job is to deliver election results. Now, to get election results, you probably need economic success. You probably need policy success. You probably need ideological success. But the point of the strategist is to balance out the money guy and balance out the leader, because the leader is the idealistic one who has the ideas. They're the leader, of course. The strategist is supposed to rein in the money guy and rein in the leader so they can do policies that actually improve their electoral odds. So in other words, that are wedging people towards them and not against them, are showing up their base, etc., etc. And where am I going with this? Well, the Liberals are sorely lacking this. They almost... It doesn't feel like they have anyone actually filling this role. You look at their ads, their ad campaigns suck. You look at their messaging campaign is just incoherent. It sucks. Again, let's look at the case of this HST issue. Now, sorry, the $250 checks, I mean. One of the core parts of the Liberal base are retirees, particularly retired women. Now, a notable fact about retirees is they're retired. Almost all of their... Apologies for that sound, I just knocked over my glass. The notable thing about retirees is almost all of their money is coming from either CPP, OAS, GIS, or, say, a government pension, or a private sector pension, or your RRSP drawdowns. Very, 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 very few people over the age of 65 make employment income. Very few. Now, this $250 check was only going to people who make employment income. So all of the retirees are essentially disqualified from it. Now, the retirees are one of the core parts of the current Liberal coalition, and they're very unhappy about this, especially the ones who have very, very little in the way of either private sector pension, government pension, or RRSP drawdowns. The ones relying on the GIS, OAS, and CPP as their only source of income. And that's a decent percentage of seniors, or perhaps seniors still that might have some RRSP or might have some government pension, but they're still not rich. Like, we're talking like their household income might be 70, 80,000 range. Now, these groups, or these seniors, are disqualified entirely. And they're very mad about it, because they feel they could use $250, at least as much as anyone else could use $250. So it's already going off for a bad start. That's a core part of the Liberal base that you've just pissed off. But another core part of the Liberal base is also pissed off, because another core part of the Liberal base are people on welfare for various reasons, and particularly people on disability. Now, if you are on disability and do not get employment income because you're now disabled, you do not qualify. Now, before you take what I'm saying in this video and you don't, I think these are supposed to automatically go out to you. But if you really want to double check to make sure you qualify, there is somewhere on the government website about this where they tell you what line item you need in your tax returns. So check that yourself. Do not trust just what one person on an internet video is saying when it comes to your personal finances. But for the most part, people who have received welfare for most of their income and have little or zero in the way of employment income, or people such as on disability, do not get the check. Now, how many people is this? I'm not 100% certain, but a lot of these people vote pretty strongly for the Liberals, and they're pissing them off again. And this is a case where your strategist needed to be in the room and saying, wait a minute, why are we doing a really big fiscal program that we are intentionally excluding some of the only parts of our base left? It's not good policy. Or take, for example, the HST exemptions. The HST exemptions are really random. It's not very clear on what is actually being covered. It's not very clear on what's being targeted. And there's penalties for companies who either wrongly apply the HST or wrongly don't apply the HST. So a lot of small business are really unhappy about this change, understandably. And a lot of people are unhappy about this change because they're going to probably rapidly find out, because most people who have not watched videos like this or have not followed this very closely, and I verified this by talking to people, by the way, think that this HST freeze is universal. It's not. So people are going to go shopping with the expectation that this is universal, and it's not. And they're going to be angry about it, because of course they are. They're expecting a tax discount, and they've planned around it that they're not getting, because it's a very arbitrary subsection of things. And this is kind of the overall arching issue the Liberals have. That they've had for 3 years, since really Morneau's left the picture. Because when Morneau was still in the picture, they had 2 of the 3 parts of the trifecta. And now they only have the leader. They're missing a strong, highly knowledgeable money guy, and they're missing a strategist. And that's one of the reasons why they're so floundering. They have absolutely no idea what to do. They have no one who's familiar with campaigning and how to actually win voters, how to message to voters. So you see them just floundering around with their usual calling cards. Oh, we're going to ban an arbitrary subsection of guns today. Oh, we're going to bash the conservatives for not being pro-abortion this other day. We're going to go do a weird tax thing that is really complicated and people don't really understand over here, etc., etc. And these are all symptoms of a party leadership that has a broken trifecta. It doesn't understand. It doesn't have people checking the leader, so the leader is just kind of flopping around trying to figure things out. Because this is an important thing. Even in the most absolute monarchy you can think of, the most dictatorial regime in the most tin pot third world country you can think of, no one rules alone. It's literally impossible. You need other people in your regime. That's why even in, say, Russia, that's mostly a single party state for the most part, Putin has cabinet ministers. He doesn't have cabinet ministers because Putin wants cabinet ministers. He has cabinet ministers because he needs cabinet ministers, because he can't do everything alone. And that's really the original purpose of the cabinet when you go way back to the origins of it. The cabinet was the king appointing a bunch of guys to help him do things. Oh, I need someone to help me run the finances. I'm going to get a finance minister. I need someone to help me do justice. I need a justice minister. I need someone to help me just run the country generally. I have a prime minister. I need someone to help me with the military. I'm going to have a minister of defense. That's the origin of these departments. It's the origin of these parts of government. People can't rule by themselves. And at this stage, the Liberal Party, either through design or just accident, is Trudeau ruling alone. Everyone left in the caucus is either completely cowed or a sycophant. No one else is there, apparently, that Trudeau seems to respect or has the courage to talk to Trudeau in a way to balance him. Not in the way that Jerry Butts did. Not in the way that Bill Morneau did. And that's really, before you look at any other considerations, the overarching political trends in Canada, or the policy issues that happened here or there, or the current economic problems here or there, the sole originating problem in the Liberal Party, and this is one of the reasons I don't think replacing Trudeau necessarily fixes the party, is the Liberal Party, because of how left-wing leadership works, because it's consensus-seeking and not hierarchical organization. It's not a hierarchical structure. It is a consensus structure. They don't have backups. There's no other lieutenant they can look to. When the head of the finance department disappears because he resigns in disgrace for a scandal, they don't have the finance hawk faction that they can just pick the next guy from the finance hawk faction to lead. They have a table where everyone are equals, and it's not clear who should be the next guy. And it will take a while for that to manifest, and it probably will take losing an election. It'll probably take a proper, real leadership race, which is why, again, historically, I've not really been a fan of Trudeau actually resigning for the Liberals, because I don't think you can get a real leadership race while you're in government. I think, fundamentally, it's always going to be somewhat broken. You kind of need the proper defeat to have a real new leader. But we have time to tell. We probably have 10 more months of this. And if my thesis is correct, barring big personnel changes in the Trudeau cabinet or inner circle, I think the Liberals are just going to keep losing popular vote and seats. We might see them actually hit the numbers in the raw polling of 17 or 20% range. My model has them higher because I have lower recency bias, and I kind of expect the polls are actually undershooting the Liberals. If you just look at the 2024 Nova Scotia election, that did occur. So I think there is a certain amount of, I think the polls are going to undershoot the Liberals a little bit. But, and this is a big but, it doesn't look good. They might hit there. We might see Main Street correct. The Liberals might get 17%. And don't take this criticism as not also a criticism of the NDP. The NDP has the exact same problems. And it's just less obvious because no one talks about them in the same level. But there is no obvious strategist in the NDP. Again, you can look at their messaging. The messaging is completely incoherent and is clearly not targeting anyone identifiable or winnable. Like the NDP running a filibuster on the Conservatives' confidence vote, talking and bashing them about abortion. Like, what are you doing? Everyone who already cares about abortion's already voting for you. Or the Liberals. They're not voting for the Conservatives. Like, what are you doing? Singh is tripling down on this HST relief thing. He wants to make it permanent. It's like, what? But anyways, I don't want to drag this on too long. So, I'll just like to remind everyone at the end of this video here, I am going on vacation on the 12th. That will be my last video for the year. So, enjoy it. With that, though, I bid you all adieu, and I'll see you next time with something else.